Hello and welcome to this new series where we are looking at every color and every color combination, and we will be seeing what they are all about through looking at which factions they belong to. So mono white we are starting with, and we will be going in Wooburg order, or the way I think Wooburg order works. So if you have any complaints, you can file them down below, and I won't do anything with it because I will be making these videos anyways in the way I like it. So mono white thinks that we are better together. Mono white builds temples and drills their armies. It writes laws. It raises cities meant to outlast the people who founded them. White is about being more than yourself. The offer is simple, and it is a real offer. You kneel to something bigger than you, a god, a queen, a law, a machine, and in return, you get order, protection, and a place in the line. Maybe some safety and warmth. But every white faction has the same kind of crack running through it. And this whole episode is about watching for it. The moment we protect each other hardens into you will conform. A good story runs on more than one thread, so today we will be looking at the sun for the warmth, for looking up at something that is bigger than you, to the spear, which is of course something literally used by the likes of Elspeth Tyrell, or maybe even sometimes a Gideon or many of the soldiers that we see in white, but it is also something that is granted to people by gods, by masters, something like that. And the flock, because the oldest picture white paints is of itself as the shepherd with a flock, and the flock is a beautiful but dangerous thing. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Now this is dangerous, but it is also a beautiful thing. It is the bargain under all 7 of these stories. You give up your wanting, your wandering, and a little bit of yourself, and you will never face the darkness alone. We will come back to the shepherd more than once, so watch what he asks of the sheep as the price keeps climbing. And in the other colors, by the way, we will not be following the same factions in the same order. For mono white, I think it is logical though, to start with Ardenvale, the court of loyalty on Eldraine. White's promise in its Sunday best is Ardenvale. A fellowship that keeps its own and never leaves a single one of them behind. On Eldraine, chivalry isn't a metaphor, it's how the entire kingdom runs, and Ardenvale is its widest court. Eldraine has 5 knightly courts, and each one keeps a virtue. Ardenvale keeps loyalty. Near the top of its central tower burns the Circle of Loyalty, a ring of eternal silver white fire with dozens of guards posted around it at all hours. This is something you won't get to just like that. You need to squire for a night for a long time and show that you are actually loyal. Now, the Circle of Loyalty on a card says that it costs less for each knight you control. This is because the stronger white gets, or the more people that conform to its values, the easier it becomes to get new squires and knights to join their ranks. Creatures also get +1/+1, which means that the circle gets fed by the knights, but it also feeds them in return. And whenever you cast a legendary spell, you create a knight token. Same with if you pay for it. And this is, I think, also very interesting, because yes, legendary stories, legendary people can inspire people to join Ardenvale, but also can they pay for them to enter, which I think is very funny. To become a knight of Ardenvale, you don't kneel for a tap on the shoulder, you step into the flame. So what happens if you want to step into the flame? So near the top of the castle central tower, there is a ring of burning flame. An aspirant who wants their spurs walks up to it in front of the assembled court. They don't have a sponsor, they don't have a lineage, they don't have a sword. And if they do have those things, which they probably won't, then it doesn't even matter. They leave those things behind, because whether you are a king or whether you are a peasant, doesn't matter. You step up to the flame and you get burnt, or you walk through unburned and you are a knight. If you are burnt, you are probably, well, you are dead. Let's not beat around the bush. Now, Eldraine is inspired by the Arthurian stories together with the Grimm stories, or the Brothers Grimm. It is shining courts ringed by a fairy tale wood full of teeth, and the court itself needs to protect itself from the things around them. Now, just saying the name Ardenvale is supposed to weave a protection spell around the speaker and their allies. This is believed on Eldraine, and probably true because this is magic. What is also interesting on Eldraine is that there are 5 courts, 1 for each color, and every court also needs to house the other values. So while Ardenvale is all about loyalty, they also need to be persistent, courageous, knowledgeable, and strong. Just, for example, not as strong as a Garenbrig giant, but they still need to be strong. Now, a little story, because before the Golden Age, the Court of Loyalty broke its own vow. Ardenvale wasn't always like this. Here is the part that everyone skips in the story. Generations before the Kenriths, the rulers of Castle Ardenvale, turned their magic to petty, selfish, wicked purposes and betrayed the virtues they claimed to uphold. The realm paid for it. No High King for 2 full generations. Spurs of the wilds grew back into countryside that had been cleared long ago. Ogres and dragons rampaged as they pleased, because no 2 towns could agree to fend them off together. Witches roamed where they liked and handed out evil gifts and terrible afflictions. The Wild Hunt rode. So the crack we're tracking all episode isn't something that happens to White at the end of the story. On the very first plane, in the Court of Loyalty itself, it had already happened once. Everything that follows is a restoration, and this is kind of a cycle. Now, the fun thing, or the good thing that happened, is that Kenrith, the returned king, returned I guess, but Kenrith is a good king as well. He united all of the 5 kingdoms and made sure that they were one. This is also why on the card Kenrith, the returned king, we see all of the 5 colors represented. We also see what they stand for. For example, you put a +1 counter on a creature, that is very green, because it is all about strength. For example, or drawing a card is all about knowledge. Now, Kenrith was a very good king, but before that he needed the questing beast. The questing beast gave Kenrith a mission. So, and Kenrith actually succeeded this time. The questing beast then gave him and Linden a sword as the mark of its favor. So it picked a humble man, Kenrith, and it picked Linden apart from each other. Now, Kenrith being a humble man is exactly what the countries needed, the kingdoms. But sometimes the kings and queens aren't what the country needs. Now, Linden actually didn't finish the quest. She interrupted her own quest and gave up her claim to the highest seat in the realm. Because Algenesis, so Kenrith's 2 children, Rowan and Will, were in danger and somebody had to turn back for them. She got them out and then she married him and raised the kids as their own. That is the Court of Loyalty in one decision, and the way it should be. No right, no public test. A woman gave up a crown because 2 children who weren't hers needed someone to come back for them. They made her Queen of Ardenvale anyway, which is the realm quietly admitting she had passed the only trial that ever counted. For one bright generation, the 5 squabbling courts actually coordinated. Now, I want to talk a bit about the virtue of loyalty. This is something that came back in another set, not Throne of Eldraine, but Wilds of Eldraine. In this, we see what is left when the court has abandoned all else. We see that there are still some knights holding fealty to Ardenvale, so one actually returns, and we see what the virtue of loyalty does. It says at the beginning of your end step you put a +1 counter on each creature and you untap those creatures. Now this is actually very important, because we are not only about strengthening our own people, we are bringing them back because of the promise of strength together. So this is mono white working, belonging as a strength, loyalty as a covenant instead of a leash, and the shepherd here really does lay down his life for the sheep, as we saw mostly from Linden. Now, we have literal shepherds on Eldraine. We have shepherd of the flock, which is actually very interesting, because mono white says not all heroes carry swords. And also, mono white says we would like to pay to return a permanent to its owner's hand. And what is actually interesting here is that this is an adventure. And for many of the creatures on Eldraine, at least the knights, returning someone to a hand isn't really an adventure. But to the shepherd of the flock, it really is. Protecting his people, his flock, or maybe just his sheep, is maybe enough for him as a story, as his life's work. Now also look at the sign of Ardenvale. When we look at Linden, for example, we see all of those circles. That is because the circle of loyalty is represented in many of the designs of Ardenvale's people. This is also because, of course, the sun is one of our other themes in this video. Now, I want to have you picture the squire at the threshold of the circle of loyalty. The court stands around him in a silent ring. Maybe his father is even there to look at him, and maybe the father already was a knight, or maybe he wasn't and is still proud of his child. The fire throws a light that you can't trust, because the circle of loyalty doesn't feel hot at all. It doesn't flicker in a normal way, and it isn't definitely the sun, the actual sun, working its magic. So one step the squire takes and either the flame will part around the squire like water, or it doesn't. There's no lying to it and there's no birthright, there's nothing you can do, it's just testing whether you are a good person and whether you will be loyal. Whatever else Ardenvale got wrong, it made everyone walk in on their own 2 feet, even their kings. Now it did go wrong because the Fey planeswalker Oko turned High King Alginus into a stag. Without the king, the courts became chaotic, and they came apart almost overnight. Then the new Phyrexian invasion also happened to finish the job, and Ardenvale and every other court fell to the invaders. And Kenrith and Linden both were killed defending the castle. The witch Ariette stepped into that vacuum. She claimed the ruin together with Ashok, dressed its halls in her own violets and Ashoks, and renamed it in the court of the Ardent Queen. A court built on loyalty, held by a woman whose signature magic is making people love her against their will. It is still loyalty in a way, but it definitely isn't one that is given freely. No flame to walk into, no worth to prove, just make sure that you can sleep and feed your nightmares to a thing, an almost godly thing. So we are left to question, what is loyalty worth once the thing you soar to is ash, and somebody new is just sitting in the chair? Now this is an interesting question, because on Ardenvale the people actually went away and there aren't that many knights left. If you look at Wilds of Eldraine, there actually are maybe 2 or 3. But still some people did return, not because they were loyal to the king, but because they were loyal to loyalty itself. And that is, I think, the most beautiful, pure thing you can do. Now also, if belonging has to be earned by walking into a fire, is that devotion, or is it the first and prettiest form of control? Now this question I will let sit, because we will look at chapter 2, where we look at Oketra, the god of solidarity on Amonkhet. Now our shepherd is a god and the whole city is the flock. Oketra taught a walled desert city one lesson above all others: nobody survives alone. And she died proving she meant it. In the city of Duskmourn, 5 gods raised the dead as living champions and drilled them toward a promised afterlife through 5 sacred trials. Oketra held the first trial, and it is, of course, the most foundational one, the one the others built further on top of, in a very warped way. Oketra's viziers raised and educated every citizen from childhood. This was actually the longest trial in a way, because you were taught to be together and to work together from birth. A literal flock, or a crop as they are called on Amonkhet, from cradle to grave. Amonkhet is magic's ancient Egypt. Sun discs, embalming, monuments raised to a pantheon of animal-headed gods, and Oketra is kind of like the cat god here. The plane's name falls in Amun, the hidden creator god of Egypt, the unseen one, which is a quietly savage joke, because the true hidden power shaping Amonkhet is no benevolent creator. It's Nicobolus, watching from behind the sun, somewhere in the multiverse. Now I want to look a little bit at Oketra again, the card. So Oketra the True is a 4-mana god that is indestructible, as they are a god, and has double strike, because she can shoot very fast, I think. But of course the most interesting part is that she is limited by not being able to attack or block unless you control at least 3 other warriors. Otherwise it would be pretty strong to have an indestructible sort of 6/6. Even better than that, actually. But this actually shows that she is true to her own values and she wouldn't attack alone. She is the god of solidarity and she is true to her word, let's say. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. Duskmourn is a green pasture made real. Walls against the horrors, water in the desert. But hold that image for a bit, because on Amonkhet the pasture is a lie. First, again, we return to the trial. The trial of solidarity is that Oketra will shoot an arrow and make you walk up to it together with your people to find their own obelisk standing in the middle of the chamber, the one they spent years building together. Now, enemies will swarm in from every side. The ground is treacherous and full of shifting sands, and anointed mummies, horned beasts and angels are attacking you from everywhere. The initiates and the obelisk at the same time. They are coordinated. There's no route a lone hero can walk, and the crop has to defend the obelisk and fetch the arrow at once. And this can be done unless every one of them trusts somebody else to hold their line. Now, I also want to show you the card that shows this off. The Trial of Solidarity, where of course we see the god and we see someone who has passed. The weird thing is, in the art we see one person, but this is because they needed the cards to look exactly alike, I think. Now, the Trial of Solidarity, instead of giving you a creature or something like that, will give creatures you control +2/+1 and gain vigilance. Now, this is actually pretty good on a 3-mana card, and also you get to return it once you have passed the trial, so the next person can try. Of course, this one shows that you strengthen all of your creatures and not just one, and this way you are a team. Away from the trial, Oketra patrolled Duskmourn streets herself, firing golden arrows through the Hekma at anything she saw beyond it. The power from the arrows was actually taken from the sun. She also carved glowing glyphs into each crop's obelisk to honor them by name. One arrow could drop the largest monster the sands could produce. Now, there were many shepherds, angels and things attacking the Hekma, and they were trying to tear it down, but Oketra made sure that they couldn't ever do that. The protection itself was of course very important, because there were many zombies and other things trying to get the people of Amonkhet. Notice that the sun now has quietly changed jobs, because on Eldraine it was a ring you walked into, and here it's a weapon pointed outward. The second sun, the one Oketra draws her arrows from, is the one the whole plane is waiting on. The card called Approach of the Second Sun shows this, where once the second sun has reached the point between Nicol Bolas's horns, you will win the game. And this is a promise that will be true in game, but not really in the real lore. Now we see a sort of samey pattern where all 5 colors have their representation in a value. White got Solidarity and, for example, black got Ambition, and we can see that they are all very alike, and in fact the green one is exactly the same even. But they are still kind of different, because on Eldraine the values were all about being good and they were more inwards facing. Now here they are more outwards facing, and they are what you need to enter the army of Nicol Bolas. Now I want you to imagine the crop at the far wall again, this time a different trial. The arrow is gleaming out of reach and the floor is already turning against them. Nobody alone is fast enough to clear it, so they do the only thing the goddess ever wanted them to learn, and they make a bridge out of themselves, shields up, shoulders locked, and one hand reaching over another's back. And the arrow comes home carried by a dozen fists at once. Her whole theology acted out on a training room floor. And now this is actually a very bad way to do this, but I was wondering how you would get through the sands otherwise. Maybe they build a bridge out of something else, but they don't really have the resources, so, well. Now, Nissa found something out on this plane. Nissa is of course a green planeswalker, so we won't talk about her too much, but the gods of Amonkhet did not know what had been done to them. Nissa worked this out, because she found that they are manifestations of the plane's own ley lines. They were older than Nicol Bolas actually. They were the living expression of Amonkhet itself. And Bolas then, when he took the plane, had altered the gods in subtle ways so that they were oblivious to their changes. Now think about Oketra. Her devotion to Solidarity was real. Her love of her crops was real because she loved her people. And underneath all of it, a dragon had quietly edited the thing she was to make that Solidarity into something useful where his army could actually work together. So the whole paradise was engineered by Nicol Bolas, and the 5 trials were quality control for an army of the dead he meant to harvest. In the hour of promise, the scorpion god killed Oketra. One of her final acts was to spend her last strength healing people caught in the devastation. Bolas wasn't finished desecrating her though. He raised her as a corpse as a zombified god eternal and marched her to Ravnica, where she had to lose a divine arrow at Gideon, who so much loved this god and what she stood for. Bolas obliterated Oketra, and the distraction led Ban to bite him and strip his spark. Her sister finished the job her death made possible. Fragments of her Lazotap covered remains are kept in a museum on Ravnica now. This is interesting but very sad at the same time. Solidarity outlived the goddess on Amonkhet too. So a new god stood up. Basri Ket stood up, but also, which is not a god, but a planeswalker, but also Ketramos, the actual god, the new dawn. This is the white and black god, which is interesting because the white has given way to some maybe ambition, but probably just a sense of self-preservation. Also, Ether Drift needed the card to be white and black because Amonkhet was in those colors. But story-wise, it is also interesting that they got a little bit of self-preservation. So, the arrival of Ketramos, a new god summoned into being by Basri Ket's faith in Oketra. Now, Ketramos calls Oketra his mother. He carries her bow and protects her followers as his own. And now finally Amonkhet has gone back to a world where they can focus on restoring their world. I wonder if it will still be a desert the next time we see it. Speaking about gods, we have the god of the sun from Theros for chapter 3. Heliod raised the sun with a spear and called himself the greatest god alive. The trouble with gods on Theros is that belief is what powers them, and without it, they are powerless. Heliod, the god, is a 4-mana god that still has indestructible, which is a theme for gods, not mono-white. Maybe a little bit for mono-white too. But these ones awaken once you have enough devotion. Once you have enough white pips, in this case 5. Before that, still, Heliod will give your creatures vigilance. Vigilance, another theme that returns many times because you need to watch out for each other. He also helps you create tokens. Now Heliod, the god of the sun, law and retribution, called himself Lord of the Pantheon and demanded praise from mortals but also from gods. He turned on anyone who questioned him, also gods, and here the shepherd flips inside out. A good shepherd exists for the flock. Heliod needs the flock to exist for him. It is his food, because without it he doesn't exist. And what is actually interesting is that on Theros, the gods turn into what people believe of them. Now Heliod could be a generous god when it's flattered him. He, for example, named or armed a young soldier of Akros called Kithion, who then became Gideon. And when a battle-worn planeswalker named Elspeth Tyrell prayed to him, he made her his champion and forged her weapon, Godsend. Then, jealousy did what jealousy does, and Elspeth destroyed the usurper gods Xenagos in Nyx, and Heliod, terrified she might ascend to godhood and rival him, waited until she was hollow with exhaustion from that very victory. He took Godsend out of her hands, and here the spear is returned to kill one of his own. You'd like to imagine he hesitated, that even a sun god felt the shadow of what he was about to do. But he didn't. He waited until she could barely lift her head, took back the spear he had given her with his own hands, and used her exhaustion as a door. The cruelty wasn't the killing, it was the patience. Now death on Theros doesn't stick the way it should. Trapped in the underworld, Elspeth got hold of a shadow of Heliod's own spear and clawed her way out with it. This is actually represented on a saga where we also see Ashiok and the god of death, I think. Now you exile target permanent an opponent controls with converted mana cost 3 or greater, probably because Elspeth died. Then non-creature spells your opponents cost 2 more to cast until your next turn. It will be very hard to get out of here. But then you return that creature card or planeswalker card from your graveyard to the battlefield and make it slightly stronger. Elspeth at this point was a planeswalker that is very much strong, and we can see here the Shadow Spear in her hand. She still strengthens other creatures, 2 target creatures, because she chooses her soldiers wisely, and you also get to create those 2 human soldier creature tokens. You also can gain life, and you can escape Elspeth because she will return until she has done what she needs to do. Now, Elspeth arrives as the sun's champion, Heliod's chosen, carrying his gifts. He kills her for it, and the next card with her name on it calls her the sun's nemesis. Same person, same sun, and the only thing that changed is what he did to her. Then there's a whole saga called Elspeth Conquers Death, which is a fairly bold thing to name a card after a woman who was murdered. But she did conquer death, and she did return. Now, Heliod, beaten with his weapon in pieces, ended up imprisoned in the underworld. The sun god filed away underground. That's where he was when the Phyrexians came, and it seems he was let out to help find them. Heliod, the Radiant Dawn, was back but then got completed. Now how do you complete a god? On Theros actually this is possible. It is possible because gods exist of the beliefs of the people. So if you complete enough followers, then the gods will eventually shift into what you need them to be too. Kamigawa is next. The Imperials. The Imperials are a government in mono-white. They stand for stability and law, mostly. The Imperials are the most powerful organization on modern Kamigawa. They were founded to help the great kami Kyodai manage the delicate merging of the mortal and spirit realms. And over generations that Judy grew into a full governance again. Their throne is unlike any other in this episode. The title of Emperor goes to whoever Kyodai chooses to bond with, body and soul. The shepherd is literally fused to the living land in this way because, of course, Kyodai is a spirit, even if it was taken so long ago. Kamigawa in magic is Eastern. It is spirits, it is rivers, it is swords and shrines. Now, it wasn't always this enlightened, and to understand why Kyodai gets to make that call at all, you have to go back to how she and Konda family met. The Konda family for a long time who ruled the world, but Konda, Lord of Eiganjo, was a bad man who liked to steal as much power as possible for himself. He stole a piece of the spirit realm, and that really wasn't a wise choice. Kyodai was a prisoner then. So on the night Konda's daughter Michiko was born, Konda reached into the spirit realm, distilled the essence of a kami, and stole it. He sealed her inside a stone disc carved with a dragon, that which was taken, which is actually a legendary artifact you could play. You can put a divinity counter on a target permanent other than that which was taken to create a new spirit or a new strong spirit, and then each permanent with a divinity counter on it has indestructible, so you can also make them indestructible. Now, the kami he stole was the child and core of Okagachi, the kami of all things. Taking her woke her parent, and that is what began the Kami War. A 20-year slaughter between the mortal and spirit worlds, and more spirits would enter the world, and more spirits would fight the mortals, until they didn't. Konda's own daughter ended the war. Michiko freed the prisoner, and the released spirit took a shape resembling Michiko's own, and a name to match, Kyodai. It means sibling. Together they destroyed Okagachi and became the living barrier between the mortal and spirit worlds. The card that commemorates their bond is called Spirit Sister's Call. This one is from the new Kamigawa, where you get an enchantment that says at the beginning of your end step you choose target permanent in your graveyard. You may sacrifice a permanent that shares a card type with the chosen card. So sacrifice an enchantment and you get an enchantment back. Or in that Kamigawan sense, you sacrifice a spirit and you get a spirit back, or a creature and a human and you get a human back. If you do, you return the chosen card from your graveyard to the battlefield, and it gains. If this permanent would leave the battlefield, exile it instead, which is more of a mechanics thing. But trading the thing is actually important, because by giving something back, Michiko strove for peace. Then Kyodai settled her own account. She punctured Konda's eyes, petrified his immortal body, and shattered it, which, going by the card, may be less an execution than a cancellation. The card that commemorates it doesn't soften the detail, because the flavor says, turned to stone, then shattered into 1,000 still living pieces. Still living. His undying remains are presumably lying in the Jukai forest to this day, aware of everything. After that came Michiko's prosperous reign, and for generations her descendants worked alongside Kyodai to keep her legacy. Then the honorable part wore off. Dynastic infighting set in, and Emperor Daijong without an heir, and the succession crisis tore Eiganjo into open civil war. Some backed her brother, some her husband, local lords grabbed what they could, and nobles and peasants died alike. A young soldier of the Yamasaki clan decided both claimants were betraying the very people they were fighting to rule. The Yamasaki had served the Konda military for decades and were known for an unshakable sense of duty, maybe loyalty we can even call it, to ordinary citizens. He assassinated the husband, then he went for the brother and found him waiting armed in the throne room. Kyodai watched his bloodshed erupt in her own chambers, and had finally seen enough. She stripped the Konda family of their hereditary right to rule permanently, and from then on they would be ordinary citizens, and the throne of Kamigawa would never again pass by blood. Now there is a Yamazaki, a poet, in Neon Kamigawa, which just says, "The blades will have their say, but peace is built with words." Now Kamigawa has changed, and there are multiple things that changed, but our empire changed, I think, the most, because now it is a country of virtue again. Getting into the army is brutal and open to anyone. Trainees endure a grueling education to become samurai. Kami intercessors, moth riders or mech pilots nowadays. Some families have served for generations like we just saw, others start from nothing, and that's okay too. Out of that came an age of collective peace. The arts flourished, Minamo Academy was rebuilt on a promise of transparency, and new laws protected mortal and spirits. There's a shadow here too, and it's a very wide one. The regime restricts new technology hard, in the name of stability. Order brought with a sliver of everyone's freedom to invent. But set against a murder champion and the machine empress we're about to meet, this is White's most hopeful answer to a power humble enough to distrust its own bloodline. Somewhere in a testing hall lit by paper, lanterns and holograms both, a farmer's child and the Lord's heir kneel on the same floor, and the Kami doesn't ask which is which. Onto grim futures. The Alabaster Host on New Phyrexia. The Machine Orthodoxy. Every other faction in this episode wanted people to belong. Norn wanted them identical, and she would remake the universe cell by cell to get there. The metal world of Mirrodin had 5 suns, 1 per color of magic. When the Phyrexian infection took hold, it split along those 5 lights into 5 factions, each led by a praetor. Norn rose under the White Sun, and she came out with White's convictions turned up to a lethal absolute. There is one correct way to be, together as one, and she alone understands it, and everything that isn't perfect must be made perfect. Norn called it the Machine Orthodoxy and preached it like scripture. And the scripture has a secret in it that is worth a whole chapter. The card, Norn says, the Gataxians whisper amongst themselves of other worlds. If they exist, we must bring Phyrexia's magnificence to them. And this is interesting because it kind of happened eventually. The Argent etchings aren't Norn's words, they're Karn's. The guiding text of the Machine Orthodoxy dates from the years the silver golem Karn was imprisoned on the plane, his mind corrupted, raving. The Phyrexians wrote down what he said. Argent means silver, and the book is named after him, of course, so the scripture Norn built a religion on, the text she preached and enforced and tore people apart to make them worthy of, is a transcript of a prisoner's delirium. She didn't write her own holy book, she inherited it from a man in a cell, or a robot or something like that, a golem at least. Now, the old psalm, "He maketh me to lie down," meant it as comfort. The shepherd lays the sheep down to rest. Norn is what happens when a shepherd hears that line and takes it literally and forever. Lie down, because then at least you will be able to manifest yourself in the whole. Norn, the card, is a 4-mana Phyrexian praetor, one of the 5 in the cycle, of course, again. This one says, whenever a source an opponent controls deals damage to you or a permanent you control, that source's controller loses 2 life. Now, For most Praetors, you need to do something, to sacrifice something. For Duskmourn, she takes White's thing to have multiple creatures, and she says, you need to sacrifice them. Then you get to enact her plans. This is actually a very warped way to look at it, but Duskmourn doesn't care about how you get into the fold, but even if you have to die, you will do it. Now, look at how Phyrexian White is drawn. Not rust and viscera like the other Praetors, it is smooth porcelain and alabaster. The white marble of Renaissance saints and cathedral statuary turned clinical and wrong. It's the most unsettling choice in the faction. A horror that looks at a glance exactly like holiness, but very, very, very much bloodied. Here's the crack from the very first minute, split all the way open. Ardenvale's shepherd kept the flock together, but Norn keeps it the same in a way that binds them together, literally. This is the third time the pattern returns where we have all 5 colors. In this case, Duskmourn is about orthodoxy, Jin-Gitaxias blue was about progress, black about scheming, red about fervor, and green about predation. Finally, green got another word for what it is about, predation. But today we are talking about orthodoxy because we want to go as far as we can to make every living being connected. Now, to be completed is to be remade into a Phyrexian. The glistening oil takes the flesh, the body is opened, its weak mortal parts cut away and replaced with porcelain and blessed machinery. The porcelain, by the way, is a way to have your mind be easy access to your leaders. It needs to be available. The mind itself is then overwritten with devotion to the orthodoxy, and what gets up off the table calls the whole ordeal a gift, a promotion from imperfect meat into something worthy and altogether together. Sit with that framing. Ardenvale offered a flame and let you choose to walk in. Kamigawa let the flock pick its shepherd eventually, and completion, what we see here, is the shepherd deciding about you, calling the knife an act of love. Norn outmaneuvered every rival Praetor and crowned herself Mother of Machines. When the Mirren angel, Atraxa, was captured, Norn rewarded her with completion and rebuilt her as the Praetor's almost single, unified voice. Only Red didn't accept this. Red wanted to be different and apart, and in this way, White and Red stood against each other, like they always do. Then Duskmourn reached for everything. She used a corrupted imitation of Kaldheim's World Tree, the Invasion Tree Realmbreaker, to open new Phyrexia onto the entire multiverse. And here's the detail that makes her the ultimate white tyrant. She rewrote the formula of the glistening oil itself so that every order in the Phyrexian hive mind now issued personally from her. Not a shepherd with a flock, a single will wearing millions of bodies. The alabaster host was her spear, the largest and most fanatical wave of the invasion found on every conquered plane, singing hymns to the orthodoxy while it completed worlds limb by limb. She sent her completed planeswalkers out to break their own home planes, because their old loves needed to be crushed just like every single being in the multiverse. Among those planeswalkers, Ajani, the gentle healer, twisted into a weapon aimed at his own friends, and she did all of it genuinely believing she was doing everyone a kindness. One name haunted Duskmourn. Elspeth, back again, from Theros, from somewhere else before that. Norn had grown so paranoid about the soldier turned planeswalker that she built whole missions around preventing her return. And this was what has done her in, actually. It didn't work. As the final battle broke over Realmbreaker, Elspeth burst out of the blind eternities as a newly anointed archangel and told Norn the truth of her eyeless face. A crusade of unity run entirely for one being's ego is the deepest betrayal of the ideal it claims. And in this, Elspeth has found the idealistic core of white again. Then Chinkatexias, the blue one, sick of Norn's selfishness, turned his blue army on her. She slaughtered them and crawled legless towards escape and the reconstructed Karn, the prisoner whose ravings became her Bible. The silver man her entire faith was named after, broke his own pacifism to grind her into the ground, because this was not what he meant. She had made herself the hive's single node, so the instant she died, every fraction on every invaded plane stopped moving at once, together with the connection of the world tree. A question. Where exactly is the line between a flock that moves as one and a flock that has been erased? Because it isn't once the people stopped moving. Actually, the flock wasn't one because they didn't follow someone, they were moved by them. And there is a very distinct difference. We are turning darker now. The Mistmoors on Duskmourn. The empty rooms. Duskmourn isn't a plane with a haunted house on it. It is the house, endless and alive. And the Mistmoors is the wing white would call home. The whole plane of Duskmourn is one infinite mansion ruled by the moth demon Velgavoth, which is black, so we won't talk about it today, but Duskmourn has its rooms sorted loosely by the 5 colors of magic. Loosely, I say, not because they aren't distinct, but because they sometimes intermingle. The Mistmoors is Whitestone, and it's built entirely out of White's aesthetic vocabulary. Whitestone, billowing drapes, drifts of wind-blown sand, attics and foyers and chapels. A cathedral hush over everything. And it's wrong in a way calibrated to unsettle White specifically. The drapes move with no wind. The sky is a flat dead grey with no sun anywhere in it. And all you look around is openness and emptiness and nothing, until you wish for there to be something. And once there is that something, you will wish for there to be nothing again. Other zones of Duskmourn attack you, they drown you, or rot the floor out from under you. The Mistmoors just empties you out by being so empty. This isn't the wing full of monsters, it's the wing that is too quiet, and that is enough. Its ruler, the overlord of the Mistmoors, doesn't even need to muster an army the way a proper white commander would. It spins soldiers out of the empty air, the drapes that feed them, the insects come from nothing, whenever it steers. You walk the hall, because the hall is all there is. The drapes lift as you pass, though you feel no wind, and settle behind you like something exhaling. You start counting doors to stay sane, and you lose count. And you understand the way you understand things in dreams, that the house isn't trying to frighten you. It simply has nowhere for you to arrive. And then you are frightened again, and you know that this is actually what the house wanted you to feel. Dread, not fright. The survivors here are White's actual virtues hunted through a funhouse mirror of White's own imagery. They form fragile alliances and save rooms, faint light-sculpted glimmers flickered through the halls. White's enduring part is innocence, the one where you are not afraid of nothing, because nothing doesn't do anything, There's one more person worth knowing here, and she isn't the survivor and she isn't mono-white, she's all colors. Marina Vandrel is the occultist who went looking for Valgavoth in the first place and found him. She freed him. She didn't want the world to feel the same everywhere, and she was looking for a safety net against bullies. And in this way, Valgavoth and Marina had a very mono-white connection for a moment, although from Valgavoth on, it was more for the demon himself, of course. Everyone else aside from Marina Vandrel is running through the house. She opens and closes doors, and that's what curiosity buys you in this place. Opening doors, not knowing what is around you, that is what Marina got. She was promised safety and she got exactly that. So strip away every god and law and throne, snuff out the sun, take away the shepherd entirely, and this is the sediment left at the bottom of the collar. Not a crown, just one refusal. Don't leave anyone behind. That is what the survivors are all about. Once there's nothing else left to save them, they turn to each other and find solace in being together. The last one, Celestial Palatinate. On the edge of eternities. Magic went to outer space, and White showed up as a galaxy-spanning holy empire that treats the universe itself as an equation. The Edge is a ring-shaped universe wrapped around the known multiverse like the skin of an orange. Its great white power is the Celestial Palatinate, a mighty state of countless species and worlds, governed as an dynastic, absolute monarchy under the divine emperor called the Regent Maximum, currently Tamon IV. In their theology, the divine state outranks the merely imperial one, so the ruler isn't just a king. He's the living head of a faith, and his flock is measured in solar systems. The faith I talked about is Summism. It worships the grand cosmocordance through a doctrine called the bright sum, which means that everyone needs to add something, and so there cannot be nothing. The faithful believe the universe is one enormous calculation, and their holy duty is to keep tabulating it forever refining the sum total of all that is and increasing it, so you need to add something before you die. And look at what the white ship does before it's finished. Lumen-class frigate only needs 2 counters to start giving other creatures you control +1/+1. It helps the people around it long before it can fly. The blue and black ships in that set do nothing for anybody until they're fully crewed. The white one starts earlier, and we see this with many things where you or mono white is more about the small guys. The sword arm of the empire is the Sunstar Free Company, a devout insular order of cause mercenaries who explicitly do not fight for coin. They lend their strength only to causes that pass doctrine, the Regent Maximum's directives, the tenets of Summism, or the aims of the empire's expansionists, lesser monarchs, the Cosmogrants, and they're fighting a genuinely cosmic war. I want to talk a bit about the Sunborn. These are the angels of the Edge of Eternities. These are born from suns that were revived by this exact faith. Now, they return, and they are actually what made it. So a little story. Under the heading Consequences of Error, a Sir Knight of the Palatinate is warned what happens if they fail, not death, something the Empire considers worse. You will be replaced by a self that is not yourself. It will take utter possession of all your knowledge and deeds. It will walk as you, and nobody will ever know it isn't you. And of you shall nothing remain, not even the part that should pass into eternity. The instruction that follows is the coldest line in the whole faith. Prefer annihilation, because though annihilation extinguishes you, it doesn't mock you. Then, before setting out, the knight is told to speak the Litany of Dawn calmly and with the whole heart, knowing this may be the last time it's ever done by their own authentic will, and to look up and find the nearest star reborn by a horizon javelin. And this is actually how those sunborn are born. Now, I want to talk a bit about the other spacecraft, because this one is actually very hard to craft. And this talks more not about giving to the people, but taking from them. And this is actually also something that feels very mono-white, even though this one is on a colorless spacecraft. Now, the Dawnsire Sunstar Dreadnought is a 5-mana spacecraft for which you need 20 power to craft it. But also at 10 power, whenever you attack, Dawnsire deals 100 damage to up to one target creature or planeswalker, showing the power that is needed to revive a star. Now, the creature doesn't actually revive in this case, so it was more belief that made them to deal 100 damage than anything else. The oldest white promise in the game, note for note: protection, order, and salvation, as a shared project, scaled up until it spans a galaxy, and it drags the oldest white question along with it. Is a holy empire that reignites stars a light in the dark, or is it just the single largest institution in existence, and do you follow it because you can't be alone? On the edge, like everywhere white goes, the answer depends entirely on which side of the war you are standing on. So my question: when you are large enough to relight suns, who is left with the standing to tell you that you are wrong? Because sometimes we follow just because others follow too, and this is the biggest danger of this color. Now, next time we will look at blue, the color that looks at all of this and decides the real problem was belief in the first place.